Going into open session with a reminder about mobile phones and cameras, and can I say any reference to car thieves will be noted. A lot of people in the public gallery scratching their heads at that. Any apologies?
Chris Hazard.
Chris Hazard. Okay. And Alex. Yes, Alex was actually with us at 2 o'clock. Members, on page 37, there's an invitation to an Assembly and Business Trust event. It's on the impact of a potential British exit from the European Union, focusing on trade, agriculture and investment. It's on Monday the 16th of the month, here in room 115 upstairs at 5 p.m, and I will be participating as chair. Could I ask members to respond directly if they wish to attend. Page 38 is an invitation from the Joseph Rowntree Foundation. This is to a conference exploring ways to create first job opportunities in Northern Ireland. It's scheduled for Wednesday 18th of November, Stormont Hotel, and again I'd ask members to respond directly. The European Commission Work Programme for 2016 is available in your meeting packs beginning at page 39. One of our responsibilities as a committee is to coordinate the annual report on Assembly Committee European priorities. So the first step is to commission Assembly Research to undertake an analysis of the European Commission's work programme. Once that's done, we can forward the analysis to each statutory committee and ask for their views on the European priorities that affect them for the year ahead. And they'll also provide an opportunity for Assembly committees to report on their priorities for last calendar year 2015. We also usually request input from our 3 MEPs, from the Committee of the Regions and the European Economic and Social Committee, as well as from our own department. And once all that information has been returned, staff will prepare a report for agreement by the committee and then a debate in plenary. Any comments? If not, can I ask our members content with the proposed process as outlined? Great. Are you content then to commission Assembly Research to analyse the Commission work programme? Content that research analyse and then we issue to statutory committees? And as in previous years, are you content to request input from the relevant stakeholders, the Department, the MEPs and the Committee of the Regions and Committee for European Economic and Social Development? Yeah.
Chair, can I just ask, what do we then plan to do with that information? Because it sort of strikes me that there has been, I suppose for some time now, a degree of around what has been going on out there, particularly with the office that we have out there. There's obviously been substantial changes to both the personnel and I suppose the management style in the last sort of year. And I'm just wondering, does this committee plan to maybe scrutinise a little bit closer now what's going on? Because there may be an opportunity to do that now. There's some new people out there.
I would like to think we would, and I think if you look back at the programme for government commitment in terms of competitive drawdown, and this is not a criticism of what was put in the programme for government, I just think everybody now says actually we weren't ambitious enough. And traditionally we've probably been more focused on peace monies that have come to us as of right, as it were, rather than becoming competitive as a nation and region within the 28 member states. So I would like to think that this work will focus all the statutory committees on challenging their departments, primarily in terms of are you drawing down all that you could actually draw down?
I mean, because the reason I ask specifically is that, I mean, I know the Business Trust usually takes a group of business people out every year. Due to lack of interest this year, it didn't even go.
Really?
Which I think is an indication of just how, I suppose, disenchanted our business community is with Europe and so on. And I just think there's possibly a job of work to do, possibly not in this mandate, but we could maybe start journey now on this, or start the steps in this mandate as to what we could. I wish I could sit here and give ideas at this moment in time, and I can't, but all I know is that there is not a good feeling outside of this place around how the office over there has actually been delivering for people. And I think that's something that we maybe need to start taking a slightly closer look at.
Right, and that's specific to the Office of the Northern Ireland Executive in Brussels. I didn't know the Assembly and Business Trust didn't get a quorum, as it were.
Is that because of interest with members, if they've been out before?
No, members probably would have gone, but it was business people, just they weren't in it.
Yeah, I'm just being reminded as well. As part of our legacy, wrapping up this mandate, we can make recommendations to the next OFMDFM about what they look at. Is it worth, at this late stage, is it worth looking at a committee visit to the office? Is that going to achieve anything? We do go out occasionally, but
What would the purpose be?
I'm only posing the question. I don't know. I'm not sure.
I'm not sure 6 months before an election it's really going to be of a lot of. But I think we could certainly help for the next mandate.
Yeah, the officials, of course, visit us from time to time, and maybe we should schedule that sooner rather than later. And just staying on European matters, members, in your table packs at page 8, you'll see an invitation to attend the latest Meet Your MP event. It's Martina Anderson this time. It's the MAC in Belfast at noon on Friday the 13th. This is the series organised by the European Parliament's Information Office in Edinburgh. Jim Nicholson, I think, was last week, and the final event in the series will take place before Christmas with Diane Dodds.
Saving the best for last then.
You may say that. A list of the committee's current invitations is at page 91. And in the absence of comments, could I draw your attention to the draft minutes of our meeting of the 21st of October? That begins in the main pack at page 93. And the question is, are members content to agree the draft minutes of the meeting of the 21st of October? Great. Thank you. Now, members, back actually in terms of matters arising to European affairs. At our meeting of the 15th of October, we noted committee inquiries on EU reform at the Scottish Parliament and the National Assembly for Wales. Could you go, first of all, in your main pack to page 99? There's there a written brief from Shona McGeehan, who's our EU Affairs Manager. This is a report on the inquiries, including copy correspondence from the Right Honourable David Liddington MP from the Foreign and Commonwealth Office. And he's writing to the convener of the Scottish European and External Relations Committee, which is how the Scottish Parliament look after European affairs. They have a specific committee. And if you look at Mr. Liddington's letter, he says this issue, which is the EU referendum bill and the UK government's agenda for EU reform, this issue is also under scrutiny by the UK Parliament, which of course includes MPs from Scotland, and indeed 2 SNPs are members of the European Scrutiny Committee. Oh, that's the wrong letter. Beg your pardon. Sorry, members. It's page 103 of your packs. Beg your pardon. It's page 103 of your packs. On EU referendum bill and the UK government's agenda for EU reform, he says these discussions are taking place with the Scottish Government, as are comparable conversations with the Welsh and Northern Ireland governments, and they're providing us with greater clarity in the interests of the devolved administrations in the reform and renegotiation agenda. So the Minister of State at the FCO is saying we're in negotiations with the Northern Ireland government. However, in a letter from the DALO to us, it says, and this is entabled on page 10, so I'm sorry you're going to have to flick from the main pack to page 10 of tabled papers. DALO says to us, the matter of EU reform and the renegotiation of the UK's membership of the European Union has not yet been brought to the Executive Committee. When the government's proposals are known, departments will engage bilaterally with their Whitehall counterparts on issues of sectoral relevance. Mr. Liddington's letter was mid-September, 18th of September, and Dallo's was 2nd of November. So can I suggest we need to seek clarification?
It does seem like those are two different issues, though, in terms of. I'm sorry, I'm flicking between the two here, but the matter of EU reform and renegotiation of the UK's membership of the European Union has not yet been brought to the Executive Committee. But on the other one, it says here that discussions are taking place and comparable conversations with the Welsh and Northern Ireland governments. It may well be that discussions have taken place either within OFMDFM or with departments, but the issue itself hasn't been brought to the Executive. I understand what you say. It's worthy of finding out exactly what those conversations are.
See, the Dialogue's letter was in response to us saying the committee agreed to write to the department to request information on how the Executive is or will be feeding into the UK government's EU reform agenda. So the response says we're sort of ready and willing, but it hasn't happened, whereas Liddington seems to be saying we're in discussions with all three devolved governments. So I can't but point it out to members and suggest we need to perhaps pass on Mr. Liddington's letter and say, can we just clarify exactly where we are, if members are content?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. We had a briefing from the Commissioner for Victims and Survivors at our last meeting. She agreed to provide an update on the timeframes and possible limitations of legacy inquests following her meeting with the Lord Chief Justice on the 22nd of last month. The Commissioner has provided a copy of the LCJ's address to the Victims Forum. That's at page 106 of your main PACS members. And in the absence of comment, we'll leave that just as for information. Outstanding correspondence begins at page 113. And in the absence of comment on that, the summary sheet of correspondence received since we last met is at page 118. And I need to draw your attention in particular to correspondence at page 127. It's from Parenting NI. I think you'll recall over summer recess I met with representatives of Parent NI regarding funding for their Odyssey Parenting for Teens programme, which funding had been cut. The committee has corresponded twice now with the First Minister and Deputy First Minister on the matter, and we have not yet received a reply. And as you can see, we now have another Parenting NI letter basically saying they are still in the dark, and indeed they've also had a meeting with a senior official in the Department of Health who was to seek some answers, and they haven't heard back from that person either, members. So it just seems to me it doesn't enhance our collective standing in the public or public opinion if we have Parenting NI saying we have a very good programme, we've had our money cut, haven't been told why, and we can't get an answer. Could I suggest we pass on this latest Parenting NI letter at page 127 and ask the department how they would like us to respond?
Agreed.
Okay, thank you. Next, draft forward work programme, that's page 13.
Sorry to interrupt, can I just raise one issue in correspondence? 6.5 OFMDFM budget position 2015 to 16 sets out that £5 million of capital DEL allocated for social investment fund has been reallocated. 3.2 million to Together Build United Community and 1.8 million returned for reallocation by the executive, 1 million of which went to education, 2.1 million social investment and 900,000 to DOJ. Is it possible to get detail as to, or some general information as to what exactly that allocation went towards?
I'll just give members a chance to take a look at that correspondence.
I think it's in around page 129.
Yeah. Okay, I see new signature programs under DSC and Atlantic Philanthropies. The department has allocated 669,000 to meet the requirements in 15-16. BSc SIF Childcare Central funds will be fully utilised in 15-16. TBUC, the ministers have approved the allocation of 8.7 million from the central 10 million fund, and the remaining allocations are currently under consideration. Social Investment Fund Capital, the department declared a reduced requirement of 5 million in June monitoring. Based on current profiles, the department considers a further reduced requirement is required of 4.309 million. This would leave 3.2 in the SIF capital budget, which the department would like to draw down at the next opportunity. Okay, well, I think members were happy that the Deputy Chair's question is asked, and if there are any other comments on that paper, we can take them now or return to it.
Chair, yeah, if I could just say, it's possible, that relates to June monitoring. I think it's possible it might have been, I'll look out the June monitoring paper and check if it's there first and circulate it if it is there.
Okay.
If not, I'll write to OFMDFM.
Okay, thank you. So the draft work programme is at page 136. Our last meeting in November, just to reaffirm, has been rescheduled by a date of Thursday the 26th, and that's to accommodate a meeting with Lord Boswell from the House of Lords European Committee. Are members content with the proposed forward work programme? Thank you. Now, at our last meeting, we received a briefing from departmental officials on the Vulnerable Persons Relocation Scheme, and today we're due to hear from non-governmental organisations on their involvement with the response to the refugee and asylum crisis. Organisations represented British Red Cross, Northern Ireland Community of Refugees and Asylum Seekers, which is NICRAS, and the South Belfast Round Table. In your packs, members, the clerk's brief is at page 139. A background paper from the four organisations that actually includes the Law Centre of Northern Ireland, but Ursula O'Hara has sent her apologies. She's not well today, so we have three of the four organisations represented at the table today. Correspondence from the First Minister and Deputy First Minister to executive colleagues on the Vulnerable Persons Relocation Scheme begins at page 144, and the Home Office fact sheet on the Syrian resettlement programme is on page 147. So we welcome Neil McKittrick, Refugee Service Manager for British Red Cross of Northern Ireland. Denise Wright is Race Relations Coordinator for the South Belfast Round Table, and Justin Kwame is Chairperson of NICRAS. So thank you very much for giving of your time today. Can I invite you to make some opening remarks?
Yes, Chair, thank you very much for inviting us along and our introductions. I think it would be helpful for a couple of seconds if we just give you a wee bit of a background on what our organisations do, so the experience we have, what we're speaking from today. You want to begin, Denise?
Yeah, I work as Race Relations Coordinator for South Belfast, so my job's very much obviously dealing with race relations, but it's monitoring community tensions, working with both the existing communities and people who've come in either as migrant workers, as refugees, asylum seekers, international students. And a lot of my work's to do with training and preparing local communities and supporting them for the changes that sort of the new communities bring.
The Northern Ireland Community of Refugee and Asylum Seekers has been here since 2002, and we've been supporting refugee and asylum seekers, around advice, advocacy, and activities. We have about 1,000 members from 33 different countries. So what we do, we provide like health support in terms of health education, looking for fundings and applying for grants for educational purposes and activities for members. And like I say, we have about, members from 33 different countries.
And the Red Cross does many different things around the world, but I'm here today to represent the Refugee Service. We look after vulnerable refugees, asylum seekers and other vulnerable migrants. And as of this week, we have seen about 800 people through our service this year. So I'll begin and just pass to our colleagues with the evidence. Just to record again, Ursula sends her apologies for being unwell, and the Law Centre are very much a part of our brief today. There's 4 real arms to the refugee process in the last couple of months that you all have been aware of and seen on your TV. So there was the Calais situation that was kind of at the start of the summer, which was captured in the main headlines. There's been the European crisis and the migration of people all across Europe. There's the Syrian Vulnerable Persons Relocation Scheme, and there is, and important for us to emphasise, there's an existing refugee and asylum seeker population already here in Northern Ireland, and there's approximately 200 applications per year, which means there could be between 500 and 600 people in the asylum system at a given time here in Northern Ireland. So of those 4 strands, it's really the Syrian scheme and the existing refugees that we'll talk about today. Immigration, as you will be aware, is a reserved matter, so it's dedicated by Home Office in Westminster. But we think there are lots of things you can do to represent people who live in your community, your constituents, people who use your health service, people who use your housing. So we think there's a lot of things this committee and other committees can look at, and that has been evidenced by some of your work in the past. So the chairman on this committee advocated the adjournment debate in Refugee Week the 16th of June last year, and that was excellent in raising the profile of refugee issues and highlighting the positive contribution that refugees and asylum seekers make to Northern Ireland. OFMDFM have been very proactive with their crisis fund, the emergency fund, which supports vulnerable refugees and asylum seekers and other migrants in Northern Ireland, and the Red Cross have played a role with that, and we have very good engagement with the Racial Equality Unit of OFMDFM. The Department for Health in the past has organised that healthcare is for people regardless of where they are in the asylum system, including those who are extremely vulnerable who have been refused. And also the DOJ have kept within the scope of legal aid provisions family reunion, for which people who have got refugee status can bring their friends and their nearest family, closest family members over from their country of origin. So those are the sort of things that the Northern Ireland Executive and Assembly have done on refugee issues. So it's great that that proactive nature is evolved, and we hope that can continue through the Syrian scheme. So when it comes to the Syrian Vulnerable Persons Relocation Scheme, I don't really want to repeat the comprehensive information you got 2 weeks ago from the OFMDFM officials, but I think it is just worth reminding everybody that this scheme will prioritise those in desperate need of assistance, and many have significant needs. So the kind of people who this scheme will prioritise will be women and children at risk, people in need of medical care, victims of torture and sexual violence, the elderly and disabled, and children at risk as well. And this is not a new issue for us. You know, it really caught the public's imagination, the whole crisis, in September with the drowning of the young boy. But we had submitted papers and been working with OFMDFM officials really since the start of the year on this. And the idea we had then, before the Prime Minister announced that people were coming over, was we thought this would be a humanitarian gesture from Northern Ireland to accept people. And we also thought by bringing people in through the Syrian scheme, it would show that Northern Ireland was kind of open for business for helping other people. And we thought that would have a positive benefit with the likes of people who think it's okay to commit race crime and things like that, so that all our parties were on board to bringing people over. We have, as the community and voluntary sector, been very involved in the planning for the Syrians coming over. We have given evidence to the strategic group at OFMDFM, and we're all involved and very active on the DSD chaired operational group. There's still a lot of work to do, but we're pretty confident at the minute that when people arrive, we will be in a position to support them. Our organisation would support people who would arrive, large families through family reunion, who would just kind of appear with very little notice, maybe families 7, 6 children, and we can cope. We do that, the Housing Executive can cope. And across our own organisations, you know, we actively see 50 people a week anyway through our own doors. So we're confident that whatever way this works out, we'll be able to deal with it. Denise?
I'd just like to maybe talk a wee bit about some of the financial issues around both the Syrian refugees coming, but also for our existing asylum seekers and refugees here. We're aware that the Syrian refugees will come with 1 year additional funding. However, we are somewhat concerned that that's very limited. We don't know until people arrive what their needs are going to be, and we would sort of like to see that, dependent on need, that funding was guaranteed slightly beyond that. At the moment, the sector is resourced through the Minority Ethnic Development Fund, but at the moment there's no real strategic delivery around that fund. It's a case of the best applications get the funding at the end of the day, and this means that very often groups with less capacity, maybe those who can't bring in consultants to support their applications, end up being displaced, and it means that very often we don't get the provision across the sector. So we really think that there needs to be a comprehensive needs analysis associated with ring-fence funding, for the need that's out there. So, for example, in the past year, 2 groups, Home Plus and Migrant Help, gave almost all the advice provision in Belfast, didn't get funding, which has left a massive gap, which then falls back on other parts of the sector who don't really have the capacity or the expertise to deal with it. We're very aware that the race equality strategy and the associated refugee integration strategy, which will sit under that, should be out very soon. But there's no point in having a refugee integration strategy unless it's adequately resourced. So it needs to ensure that the funding is going to be in place to support integration for asylum seekers and refugees, not only the Syrian group who are coming, but our existing population. As Neil said already, we only have about 200 applications a year for asylum in Northern Ireland. Bringing in Syrian refugees will double our workload, and we need to be very aware that the funding for the Minority Ethnic Development Fund is limited. For example, the maximum that can be received under that fund as core funding is 45,000. That's paltry by comparison with what you can get if you apply for funding through the community relations grants. So there's a bit of a disparity there. We're also feeling that there needs to be work done specifically around Islamophobia, and that can't be left just to the Islamic Centre, Northern Ireland Muslim Family Centre. It has to be done in partnership with local groups to be done well. For those that are currently in the asylum system, destitution is a big issue, and we've been very aware that the provision which we're going to be giving to our new Syrian refugees may well be far superior to what people are getting at the moment, and we don't want to see a 2-tier system that could cause tensions, and which is an inequality issue as well. We've been very grateful for the crisis fund, as Neil has said, but it operated for a number of months over last year, made a very significant difference to people who are in receipt of it. But it hasn't been a consistent fund. It's going to be rolled out again within the next couple of months, hopefully in place for what may well be another difficult winter. But in the meantime, groups like the Red Cross or Embrace, which is the Church's emergency fund, have been filling the gaps, plugging the gaps. That takes resources from workers as well as just the money. But when the crisis fund comes out again, we'd like a really rigorous evaluation of it to sort of identify what the gaps are, so that we can see where policy change might alleviate some of the suffering or destitution. And we're well aware that the causes around policy, some of the things to deal with are within the competency of the executive, others are devolved matters. But as Neil's outlined already, a lot has been done that's made a good difference. In terms of moving forward with the Syrian refugees, I think I'm putting my race relations head on here. I think it's really imperative that there seems to be very visible cross-party support. We know that many of the councils have passed motions, that the committee has, that the executive have. But we feel that if in any way this is seen to be weighted or supported by one side of the community, or fits some people but not others, that could be quite harmful in terms of relationships on the ground within the kind of communities that I'm working within. And so we really need people to step up and speak out about the reasons for bringing people here. It's simply a humanitarian reason. I was out in the camps in Jordan last week and saw some of the situations that people are coming from, and if anything, that's enhanced my understanding of the real difficulties and the vulnerabilities that we're going to see. And then finally, the last thing I think is about community involvement. There've been very significant goodwill and support out there in the community. I'm almost more concerned that when Syrian refugees come, they're going to be killed with kindness rather than anything else. But we know alongside that there have been some undertones of people not happy about people coming into the scheme, and there's been a level of negativity. So one of the most important things, I think, from our point of view, is very clear, concise communication about who's coming, why they're coming, what rights and entitlements they have, the fact that we don't anticipate they're going to be put into social housing, because that would cause significant tensions. So I really think that media handling is going to be particularly significant in this. So between that, visible cross-party support and the financial backing, I think those are the things that would make this really, as Neil said, look like a good news story for Northern Ireland rather than portrayed as something that's difficult.
Yes, thank you, Denise. I'm going to touch on the existing asylum seekers and refugees and English class and challenging Home Office policies, especially, as you know, is not a devolved matter. Running parallel to the urgent need to offer safe place to Syrian refugees is the need to ensure that Northern Ireland existing asylum seeking refugees are treated with humanity and dignity, including those from Syria who are already seeking asylum and have come to Northern Ireland outside the government, vulnerable person scheme, because we have members who are from Syria already here who have their asylum turned down by the Home Office. So I think there's a need to accommodate and put something in place. We don't want this opportunity scheme to be an opportunity as well to remove asylum seekers who are already in the system here and to balance the book at the same time. So we want the executive to be aware of what's happening on the ground and to keep an eye on what's going on at the same time. And as well, as it stands, English class is not free for refugees in Northern Ireland, whereas in England and Scotland, English class is free for refugees. And we believe, to be able to integrate and to seek for employment, refugees need to have access to free English classes, which allow them to integrate and seek employment and be able to, better their life and take part in society. Also, we would like, as we know, the asylum issue is not a devolved matter, and we would like OFMDFM here to be able to challenge Westminster policy, because some of the policies cause hardship to asylum seekers in Northern Ireland. For example, no resource to public fund policy, which significantly hamper the ability of victims of domestic violence to seek help. The restriction on work permission trap asylum seekers and enforce dependency, destitution and risk, pushing individuals into severe form of exploitation. While asylum policy is not a devolved matter, many of the issues that affect asylum seekers, happen in Northern Ireland here. So we believe, the executive can, and some of the issues can, lobby Westminster, even going through the British and Irish Council to use it and lobby others and change some of the issues, and it will help the community here as well. So, and I would like to thank the OFMDFM committee for inviting us here, and then the chair, we met the chair last year and he was able to push the refugee, motion debate on refugee week last year, and then some refugee issue, and then across the table as well, we have some good friends for long years. I met Alex Maskey and David and Chris Little. We've been doing lots of work with them to the all-party group, and when Alex was MLA for South Belfast as well, has been helping, the organization Refugee and Asylum Seekers for a long time. Thank you very much.
Okay, so we're happy to take any questions.
Nope, thank you all very much. Justin, can I start with you, because right at the beginning you said, you've got 33 countries, about 1,000 members, and you've been going for 13 years.
Yes.
Over that 13-year period, do things get better? Do they get worse? Do they fluctuate? What's the best thing that's happened? What's the biggest headache you've got?
The biggest, I think, in terms of better, in terms of population-wise, in terms of community-wise, there's a big improvement. Communities start to understand and helping asylum seekers and refugees. In terms of issue, like I said, because it's not devolved matter, and then education, especially not free English classes for refugees, is still difficult in terms of finding employment, and even recognize someone from Sudan or Somali qualification to be able to find work. These are the practical issues we find on the ground, because the converting qualification is not something straightforward. Usually when they convert your qualification, it's so downgraded, so people find themselves not willing to do the same job. Maybe, as an example, we have a pharmacist from Sudan. She worked as a pharmacist for 5 years, and she come here, to convert her qualification, she need to pay £10,000. She doesn't have £10,000. Someone who is a single mother, and she come from asylum process receiving 36, 195, become refugee. She has no saving. And she want to work as a pharmacist, she need to go and do and the qualification cost £10,000. So what she did, she applied for a job as a pharmacist in a firm here in Lisbon. So they were happy to take her to work there, but as a cleaner, not as a pharmacist. So most of, this is one example, we have a lot of members there, because most of our members are bilinguals, so they end up doing like interpreting work for the same organization who received to employ them. I'm talking about, Department of Justice or Health. They'll be doing interpreting for them because they can speak Arabic and English. So these are the challenging. But in terms,
Why £10,000 to transfer?
If you want to, as a pharmacist, there's a course you need to do to be able to practice. To be a to practice, so you need to do this course, and that's what we find out when we're trying to help her. Even there's there's a program by Refugee Council in England, they have a program to assist doctors to be able to become doctor, which is by Refugee Council in England. So
yeah, it costs. I think it costs 250,000 for somebody from to become a doctor right through the system. But to transfer a refugee who has the skills of a doctor into a practicing doctor only costs £25,000. So there are benefits in being able to make these people upwardly mobile. They shouldn't need to be, as Justin says, former solicitors or architects or designers working as security in the centre or working in cleaners in places. We need to create pathways for social inclusion for these people. And that will apply equally to the Syrians who come here as well.
Right, so a Syrian comes to England and will get free English lessons. A Syrian comes here.
No, the Vulnerable Persons Relocation Scheme will have free ESOL provision in it for Syrians. But if somebody goes through the normal asylum system in Northern Ireland and becomes a refugee, they won't be able to access free ESOL.
Right.
And our concern is you have two people, those people are now in the labour market, they're competing for jobs, somebody's getting ESOL classes, somebody isn't.
Yes.
So that's a manifestation of the two-tier that we're so keen to avoid.
Yes, and I was struck that you mentioned that, Denise, because I've had people come to me to say, look, we do want to support Syrians, but what about us? We are here already. And there clearly is, if not a tension, a fear that a significant tension is going to be created.
There is. At the moment, people who are in the system already, and we had a meeting at Belfast City Hall with the Syrian refugees who have made their own way to Northern Ireland. They're very much saying, bring this other group in, give them everything they need. They're very open. But there could become tensions down the line if there's a two-tier system. We have such low numbers of asylum seekers and refugees at the moment. This is going to up the numbers. It's going to be difficult, and somebody arrives maybe from another country at the minute, they'll get free English lessons for 3 months while they're an asylum seeker. The minute they get their leave to remain, they're meant to pay for that out of their basic benefits.
What would the cost be?
I think English class BMC is around £200 and £300.
There was a campaign initially to have it made an essential skill, ESOL to be made an essential skill, and there was a cost with that, but that would be open to everybody. I think we need, if nothing else, to look at it from a refugee perspective. And as we say, there's less than 200 applications per year, so you're not talking massive amount of money to achieve that.
I mean, nobody's going to be able to integrate. It's a spend to save. You'll end up with people in employment. You'll end up with people self-sufficient. If you don't get English, you could have a couple of generations before people are able to catch up.
I think 2 years ago we were able with the Law Centre to get free English class for asylum seekers, and that's what Denise was explaining. Now, for us, it's very, very important for a refugee to have free English class because it's simple. If you put them in free English class for 6 months, you assess the level, and then you put them to the work path, so they don't have to stay on benefit for many years. And this is something done in Sweden as well. When you apply for asylum, straight away you have to learn the language. So these are the things we think will benefit, the society as well. So.
If Chair, allow me to answer the initial question which you had asked, which is over the 13-year period, what have you seen that's changed? I would look at it a different way and say some people who come into the asylum system have a relatively positive experience and can go through without any real periods of destitution and get a decision and can deal with that decision. But somebody who maybe applies half an hour after them will have periods where they're destitute, where information is lost, where for some unknown reason they have to report more frequently. So it's the perceived unfairness of the immigration system as it exists.
But why is that, Neil?
I'm damned if I know, to be honest with you.
Really?
It's such as the experience of everybody we see. A lot of it is to do with just the Home Office procedures, and a lot of it is to do with people's ability to advocate on behalf of themselves. So it would not be uncommon for people to get not great legal advice. And if you don't get great legal advice, you make a decision, an incorrect statement early on because you haven't got the right advice, you haven't translated. That hangs with you the whole time through your asylum system. And there's people who come in and we would see them infrequently. And there's other people who rely on the Red Cross and the Cross and Embrace almost for their existence on a frequent basis. And one period where that is particularly obvious is when people get refugee status. People are awarded refugee status, so you've been through all the fractures of the system. You get awarded refugee status. You then come off the benefit that you were on and transfer to another benefit. And the vast majority of people who go through that system are then temporarily destitute during that period because you change from one government department, from the Home Office, on to HMRC. And people are waiting 3-4 months for things like tax credits. And in the meantime, it's the voluntary sector that is plugging that gap. So something that should be a real positive. You've got your status. People's situation actually deteriorates immediately after getting their status, and we think that is something that can and should be addressed.
And it's not unknown for somebody to have to wait up to 6 months to get child benefit through.
Right. So there are a lot of boxes to be ticked, and actually it becomes almost like a lottery, dependent on your ability to use a language which isn't your native language and rely on legal advice from somebody you've maybe only met 5 minutes ago or are speaking to on the phone. That is interesting. On the basis of the tensions, Denise, that you were talking about the existing population, are you then supportive of the UK government's position, which seems to be it's this kind of phased programme of 20,000 over the life of the Parliament over 5 years?
It's very difficult to say. We haven't done this before, so we're not entirely sure. I think what we are saying is bringing in smaller numbers and learning from the first group. And being able to evaluate very clearly as we go through, getting feedback from the agencies that are dealing with people, but also from the individuals, because at the end of the day, they're all human beings, and each of their experience is going to be different. So we're not entirely sure what we're facing because this is a new project, but I think we could say that we do think small numbers coming in on a regular basis is the sensible way to proceed.
And are you getting to input into the strategy? Because we heard 2 weeks ago from the officials there's a strategic planning group and then there's an operational group run by or led by the Department of Social Development. Are you all?
We're all members of the operational group, yeah.
We have a Northern Ireland Refugee Asylum Forum, which is an informal body, and there are 4 representatives from each of the organisations represented here, that including the Law Centre, who are sitting in that body, and I have to say that DSD and OFMDFM have been very receptive to our input.
Good. What about local government?
Well, at the minute, everything that goes through in England, the way the Syrian scheme is being done, England and Scotland, is the relationship is directly between the Home Office and a local authority. Whereas over here, because we don't have the same standard of local authority, that stuff is all going through the 2 groups that are operational. So there are local government representatives on the operational group. And I can say from our experience, Belfast City Council have been very proactive, right up until recently, even arranging sessions with the local community to do a wee bit of awareness. We don't know exactly where people will be yet. But they've definitely been involved in the process.
Yeah, I think there's Nuri and Mon and Dungannon as well. They're really keen to get involved.
Okay.
At the same time, our advice to DST is to make sure they send people where there's a support mechanism to be able to stay. There's no point to send people in the area where there's no support available. It's like, the experience very difficult. But there's, some interest from different, council area want to get involved.
Right. So, and do you see the refugees coming in effectively being clustered so that there's a sort of community? Or?
I think there's two things. There's the two things that people will need. The statutory sector can do what they can do, and we in the voluntary community sector can do what we can do. But the real success of this will be the community support and will be peer support amongst the Syrians themselves. So I think the expectation, I think the department may have said 2 weeks ago, was that there'll be small groups of people. We want people to gather so they can rely on each other and feel comfortable. But at the same time, we don't want to create, for want of a better phrase, little Syria in a certain aspect of the belt. We don't want that. So we want a pathway to social integration and inclusion for everybody. But peer support will be a key component of that. And until we know the nature of the people we're getting in, it could be singles, it could be families, then try and diffuse that together. And they will have their own ideas. So when the Syrians get here, they might say, I prefer this or I prefer that. And it's being reactive to their needs and their ideas, and improving through each iteration of people coming in.
Good. Okay, let's open it up. David McElveen.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your presentations. On the language side of things, whilst I'm 100% supportive of assimilation, I suspect if we had executive ministers here, particularly at OFMDFM level, they would be saying, well, hang on a minute, in England or Scotland or Wales, if somebody goes for a doctor's appointment, dentist appointment, parent-teacher meeting with their children, social security interview, the list is endless, they will not receive any support from interpreting services, whereas over here, that service is provided. And certainly when I speak to other representative groups in other parts of the United Kingdom, they are actually very envious in that regard of what is provided here. And I understand that there's already an appeal out for an increase in interpreters that will speak the languages of where coming from. So I think there is probably two sides to that argument as to what's most important. Is it the free English lessons for a period of time to get assimilation, or is it to ensure that when the people get here they are treated with dignity and respect, and ultimately treated safely? Because obviously if somebody's going for a hospital appointment and there's a language barrier there, it could in effect affect their personal safety. But just in relation to the folks that have already immigrated to Northern Ireland, we'll maybe deal with the locals a little bit in a little moment too. Denise, you'd mentioned particularly about the Minority Ethnic Development Fund. Yes. I mean, that fund for quite a few years now has been teetering on the brink of disappearing. So I would have thought the chances of any more money coming to it is probably going to be quite slim. Therefore, everybody is going to have to operate within the budget that is there. And I suppose, and it's an old argument, and it's been used for every budgetary issue that we've had since the year dot, but ultimately, if you rob Peter to pay Paul, Peter loses. And I suppose what I would be asking you is, you're saying that there needs to be more money diverted towards migrant help and very worthy organisations, there's no question about that. But you then have other organisations that are potentially going to suffer as a result of that. Would you see that as a major risk, perhaps, of creating almost inter-ethnic tensions within the sector? Because around the time that the EDF was, I think that's the right way to break it down, was under pressure, was not being delivered. We had Chinese Welfare Association here, we had Ballymena Inter-Ethnic Forum, we had a whole list of organisations that were very reliant on this money. And they would be likely, if we were to follow your argument through, to be here in another year's time saying our budget has been cut 10, 20, 30%. We can no longer deliver the service that we used to deliver. So how would you envisage managing that finite resource if it has to be given to another direction?
Well, I think it's about prioritising needs. What you're going to do with any type of funding, it's about having a rationale for how it's allocated is more the question. And you might find, you know, this is the percentage number of people in the Chinese community. Therefore, this is the amount that will need to be allocated for those needs. This is the need within the refugee asylum system. So this is, but at the moment, that's not how it's delivered. It is very random. So I think it's more a plea for some kind of, I suppose, strategic means of rolling it out, so that where it hits, it's actually scratching the itch and it's dealing with the need. It needs more money, but we're aware that we're in a shrinking funding environment. So it's not about being unrealistic, it's just about saying it has to be more strategic. And it has to be aiming towards integration, making people self-sustaining. If you provide English for people and they get good English, they don't need interpreters, that cuts out that cost. At the moment, all we're doing is firing money into interpreting services as opposed to equipping people that they need.
I suppose just taking on the role of devil's advocate, that, you know, all the groups that we speak to believe they are delivering an essential service, and that's, I suppose, the challenge that we have. So it's how do we make that money go further? And I suppose it sort of leads on to the relationship with local people, in that I think most right-thinking people recognise that the British government's approach to this and bringing vulnerable people from the camps directly into the UK has been a fairly good approach to things, because I think what has at times created some friction within the local community is when they sort of see reports of folks who, you know, have got to safety but want to press on to other parts of Europe which are more prosperous, and obviously that causes, I mean, I know even in my own day job I have worked with people who are almost prepared to be deported rather than take up the asylum they have been granted in another country. And I mean, I could give real life experiences, which of course I won't, but I could in cases that I've worked on. And I suppose that comes then back to what Neil, you were saying in your last answer around how do we manage the groups that are coming in, because I think there would have to be a recognition that how it has been done so far has not been great, in that you do have large clusters of migrant communities living in one particular area, and that then creates pressures on local services. You get this local foreigner divide, which can then manifest itself in a very unpleasant way, as we have seen in certain circumstances. So, I mean, ultimately, if somebody is coming here quite legitimately, as these folks will be, you need hospitals, you need schools, you need local facilities, you need somewhere to educate yourself, learn English, you need somewhere where you can get a job. That doesn't have to be Belfast. It doesn't have to be South Belfast, you know, it could be anywhere. And whilst I accept that there is an element of, I suppose, peer support, and that's important, I think we do have to be cognizant of the fact that if we find that asylum seekers are sort of gravitating towards one particular community, then that's going to have a very negative effect. And so how is the sector planning to manage the distribution?
I suppose there's quite a lot in what you said, David. The first thing we would say is the Syrians who are coming with funding, substantial funding for the first year anyway, through the international aid budget. So that's to be welcomed, and I know that officials are working with the Home Office to see how that can be extended or best utilised, certainly. I suppose we're on the operational group. There's people from health, education, housing are there. I think we do a bit of a disservice to our statutory agencies to think that they can cope with an extra 50 to 100 people or whatever this turns out to be. You know, my impression would be at these meetings the statutory officials aren't throwing their heads up in some sort of panic that they're not going to be able to cope with this. And as we say, people are being absorbed in all the time. I did an interview yesterday with the Northern Ireland Landlords Association, and the majority of people who arrive in the Syrian scheme will go into the private rental sector, and he says that they can easily be absorbed into that. So, you know, I think we'll know a lot maybe a year from now looking back, and we'll learn our lessons. But I I don't think we should be panicked into thinking that the statutory agencies can't cope with 50 to 100 people. You know, in terms of health service, we all utilise the health service. You know, my wife's pregnant at the minute, I have a young baby. If it means I have to wait another 10 minutes for an appointment, or it's pushed another day, and that's done on need, I think as a society we're willing enough to accept that. And I think it's all how it is portrayed to people. You know, the housing executives themselves would say people move into private rental sector accommodation that used to be housing executive accommodation but is no longer, and people think, oh look, they're getting straight into housing executive accommodation, and it's not. So, you know, I think there's a lot to be done around 50 to 100 people who come over here, or whatever we eventually end up bringing in. The likelihood is the vast majority of people in Northern Ireland will never interact with these people. You know, we all work in the asylum sector. There's about 200 applications per year. If I meet somebody for the first time and they say, where do you work? And I say the Red Cross Refugee Services, I work to support refugees and asylum seekers, 9 times out of 10 say, oh, I didn't know we had refugees and asylum seekers here. So, you know, I think we can cope. I think what we're talking about amongst the sector is very small groups, maybe 1 or 2 person outfits that aren't operating off a big budget but are going to see potentially a double of our clientele. You know, again, we're not talking millions and millions of pounds here. We're talking relatively small amounts of money, but making sure it's targeted where it's most needed. And that includes Syrians coming in, our existing asylum community, and already the other people like the Chinese welfare for ethnic minorities who are already here. So I don't think one has to lose for the other to benefit. I think those groups themselves would say we're all supportive of, you know, a rising tide lifting all boats on this occasion.
And Syrian refugees coming in are going to come in with all the same rights and entitlements that I have as somebody who's living here. They should not be relying on destitution funds or the community voluntary sector for their needs. Their needs should be fully met. And initially, yes, a lot of the experience and expertise is in Belfast around asylum issues, but this is a longer term project, so we will be able to, once we're up and running with the scheme and know where people are going to go, resource other areas. So where they're existing, so for example in Ballymena, Ethnic Forum, where there's some people who are refugees, there are a number of Sudanese families, but that organisation which is already there doing the work can be resourced to do it, probably without much additional, or maybe no additional funding. But until we know where people are going to be, it's very hard to plan for that community response.
And then in terms of the funding aspect, for us is MDF is a flexibility around the funding, because you remember as a APG, we have to come to the APG to ask, to write a letter to extend. So the reality, there was a problem, there was a delay in the funding, and Nicholas, we lost 1 member of staff, and we have to rely on NISM to pay our staff, pay the rent for 2 months. So if it wasn't for NISM, the organization would be gone. I think it's the first flexibility to recognize that this, group, like Neil said, will need maybe extra funding to be able to cope. Now, in terms of, distribution, we made it clear to DSD in terms of the OFM strategy operation, we don't want to create a ghetto for these people coming. And you go to West, you mentioned South Belfast, the reality on the ground, we know reason why refugee communities tend to stay in South Belfast. We know because if something happened to a Sudanese family in North or East or West or South, it will go around the community and they'll pass it around. Next time, if someone gets an accommodation in this area, they'll say, no, I don't want to go there. So they prefer to stay maybe months, years on a list just to get an accommodation in South Belfast. But at the same time, we don't want to create a ghetto. So that's why for us, even if to move 2 or 3 families into Derry, Londonderry, or Estraband or Newry, provided as a support mechanism, because these people coming here, they don't know the story of Northern Ireland anyway. They don't know that every place that will be put, it will be a welcoming place for them, providing there's a support and everything is created around them. And I believe this council they're having a good plan, a plan of action, and they're talking to DS in the OFM to offer what they can offer to these communities to bring them into the area.
Alex Maskey.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for your presentation early on. Can I first of all just commend yourselves individually and your organisations? I mean, I haven't worked with Neil yet, but I have with Denise and Justin and your organisations. I know the tremendous work that has been going on for a long number of years, and commend your efforts working with the departments at this moment in time, because I think that's actually essential, and certainly we put forward a very clear argument to OFMDFM at the outset that they needed to be working with the people who are already working, as I would always call experts in the field, but working on the ground, working with refugees and asylum seekers. We know and understand all the kind of challenges and the difficulties, and you've outlined a number of them today. I suppose for me, the challenge, and I disagree with most of your sentiments in that there will be challenges in this, and we don't want a two-tier. The reality is that this is a different scheme. This is not the same. This is kind of, in a way, bypasses the asylum seeking process. So in a way, it is two-tier from the outset. And I suppose the key for me then is the learning, working with the departments and yourselves together, learning, because whilst we do have small numbers coming in, many people will see that as a kind of a paltry small number, but the same token, I suppose, in the scheme of things, in this place that we live in, it's probably better to get it right than to have the numbers that many of us think we're well able to cope with. So I suppose the principle of bringing a small number of people here to outside will work for us to our advantage, and I suppose we will want to make sure that we do have leadership at all levels, political, community and statutory as well. So I just think it's early yet, although I'm very, very impressed by the officials who are for the most part carrying this, both at the strategic planning and the operational, and I'm glad that you have acknowledged that very, very well yourself today, because that's where actually the success or otherwise of this will be, in the planning and the putting the plans in the operation. So, I just think it is early to tell what additional resources will be required. My clear understanding of it is that when people come over here from the scheme, they can move wherever they like, so they don't have to stay anywhere. They can probably go to London if they want. So, at the end of the day, we need to make sure that they are given the support that they need when they come here, and that support's tailored to what their needs actually specifically are. I think that's well in hand. That's my understanding of it. And would expect no less. But at the end of the day, and people move in their private accommodation, I think the key point that you're making, people are coming in here under difficult circumstances from which they've arrived. We do need to make sure that there are appropriate support levels from wherever they want to move to. But that support level will be, I suppose, proportionate to what the needs are, and that's, I suppose, the kernel here of identifying what people's needs actually are, and then giving them whatever level of support is required. And I just do hope that it is a success, because it is clearly the right thing to do. We have universal support for this initiative. We've had an outpouring from members of the public, from everything from faith-based organisations, the community organisations, sporting organisations, you name it. People have been coming forward offering rooms in their homes, or whatever, to make them available. So we do have the public support there. So I suppose at a government level, it is essential that we make this process as seamless as possible, first of all in the interest of the refugees, the people who are coming here, but also, I suppose, in the long-term success of it, to make it, I suppose, commensurate with wider public understanding, so as we don't have any knee-jerk or any falsehoods been put about the place or misunderstandings. So, as I say, I just commend yourself and the work that you're doing. Hope you keep at it. I think we need to look at this almost perversely like an opportunity for people who are currently here. I have no doubt, looking at upcoming British government legislation, some of the immigration laws are going to get worse. So there's going to be a tension, and an ongoing tension, between what people here are trying to do to give support, whilst at the same token the government, which has the jurisdiction on this issue here, is actually going in the opposite direction. So there will be challenges, and I just hope that we can work together and make sure that we have as little of a two-tier system as we can possibly make it, because it is just not right that we have two sets of people from maybe even the same country, could even be the same neighbourhood, got here through a different route, treated differently. So it's just wrong.
It's a two-tier system, two-tier schemes, but hopefully not two-tier outcomes for people who are involved in it.
And that's a very good way of putting it. So again, I think we'll just have to keep, hopefully we will, with this very small numbers coming in, we will learn very quickly. I was hearing recently there that some councils saying that they weren't aware of a lot of information, but those councils aren't going to be expected to do a big lot initially, because as Neil, you made the point, they don't have the kind of policy or they're not providing services like health or education or whatever else. So, but I just do believe that there is enough goodwill out there across the board to make this scheme a success. particularly for the people who are coming in, but also as part of the wider community, because that means everybody benefits, including people who are here at the minute, a lot of whom are living under the radar, and people don't know the plight that they're living under. So thank you.
Okay. Deputy Chair, Chris Little.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you very much indeed for your presentation today, and thank you for the leadership that all of your organisations are showing on this issue. Neil, I heard you on Radio Ulster yesterday with the Landlords Association, and I think you epitomised what Denise spoke about today in terms of putting forward clear, accurate information about who people are that are coming, the serious, extreme situations from which they are fleeing, why they're coming, and accurate information about the type of limited assistance that they actually receive when they are here. It does seem to have taken startling images of children on beaches, and the fact that parents are willing to put their children on inflatable dinghies into the ocean in order to flee circumstances, to wake us up to a certain extent, to examine whether the system and the structures that we have here in Northern Ireland in terms of receiving asylum seekers and refugees are actually up to scratch. It's been a lot of the information that you've put forward today in terms of the operation group and the strategy group has been encouraging. I don't know why the First and Deputy First Minister haven't given a written statement on the floor of the Assembly, because it sounds like there is actually a fair amount of good work going on in response to the immediate refugee crisis that I think the public would benefit from hearing much more loudly and much more clearly. But that side of things is encouraging. However, Justin, in particular, in your position as chair of the Northern Ireland Community of Refugees and Asylum Seekers, you have raised concern, rightly, in relation to whether the structures that we do have in place for refugee and existing asylum seekers are actually adequate. You've mentioned language provision, legal advice, accommodation. I think you've gone as far to say that the system is degrading. So I wanted to ask you, given that we're the only region of the UK with no refugee integration strategy, how important is it that we get that coordinated refugee integration strategy in place, and what key measures do you think we need to see in that strategy?
I think it's extremely important, and for us, and it was one question. There was one question: the race equality strategy. Which, do you want, refugee? And then we said, and all the refugee asylum forum support this idea, and for us, and is one of the reason why as well, our involvement with the DST operational strategy group to give them this small area they need to be part in terms of education, employment, social inclusion, and welcoming society. These are the key issues need to be part of the strategy to be able to put things together. I think one of the things I would like to go back on what you were saying about this informing, talking to the community, because the vulnerable person allocation scheme, we're talking about people with severe medical care needs, survival of torture and violence. So right now, the community need to know most of the people coming to this scheme, some of them are never going to be able to work for the full 5 years, and they're claiming, benefit, disability type of benefit. People need to know, because when the minister, last week or this week at the Assembly said they were going to claim benefit, the BBC start calling us to talk about, or they're going to claim benefit taken back. The reality is most of the people coming to this scheme are people with severe needs, medical needs, and they may not be able to work for 5 years, and there will be, special needs, in terms of DL or ESA, or so these are the information community need to know. I saw your question when OFMDFM, where you asked about if there's a need for the strategy, integration strategy, to come first before bringing refugees. It's been something as a group, Asylum Forum has been saying we need a refugee strategy, because if we had this refugee strategy in place in the first instance, I think a lot of things will be in place already. And we've been trying hard, but one thing we cannot speculate on is the cultural change. Because I came here at the same time, I know the cultural impact. I was talking to people coming from, in general, Muslim countries, and it's going to be a big cultural change. It's something we cannot speculate on, but we're giving our experience and our knowledge, practical knowledge we had on the field. And I think for us, the refugee strategy, integration strategy is very important. Now, Syrian, are coming in December. So we don't think, we think it's very important. At the same time, we don't think, can you bring the strategy out before doing? But a lot of things we think should be in the strategy. Refugee integration strategy has been dealt with through the two groups. So we gave them a lot of information, and we open to, I think we're going to the same process going to apply again when doing the refugee strategy. Integration, we're going to be involved and give what we think should be, best way of putting the strategy in place.
Might I say something to that as well? I think one of the main things of the refugee integration strategy is that integration needs to begin from the day somebody arrives seeking asylum. At the moment, very much things only tend to begin once people have their leave to remain, and we can have people here in the asylum system for 5, 6, 7 years potentially, where people aren't allowed to work. People can end up socially isolated. So there are a lot of projects working in that already. But for example, we're doing a project at the moment where we're training up people who are within the asylum system in NVQs and hospitality. Now, they're not allowed to work, but they are able to volunteer. So, that means that if somebody gets their leave to remain, they're work ready, they're somewhere down the line, but that isn't normal policy. And so integration has to begin right from day one, that people are being prepared to integrate into society. That's very difficult for people when the majority of people in the UK don't get their leave to remain. So it's a very tricky situation. But it's a balancing act. You want people to be prepared and to be supported, but also having an awareness that they may not get leave to remain at the end of that.
I think the strategy is important, but we've survived this far without a strategy. A strategy would certainly improve everything for us, but I think where the strategy would be equally beneficial would be across other executive departments. Because you would be able to, rather than us coming up with individual cases or things that seem to reoccur, if the strategy was to call this out, the other executive departments would be able to have a vision of that and how they could all play into the strategy. At the minute, it's kind of ad hoc, and you get some good people in departments, and then that person goes on, somebody else has no experience of the refugee sector, so something upon which everything else could flow from, down to the community sector, yes, but primarily amongst other departments, so that they're all brought into it. And there's a cohesive strategy would be really beneficial to us when we go on rap doors in other departments to know what it is we're coming from.
Yeah. Also, the lack of immigration advice, which the Law Centre was giving, there is no more free immigration advice, and so for us, it's we don't understand it, and there's a very few immigration advisors, solicitors in Northern Ireland, and then we had a lot like the Law Centre had given free immigration advice, and the funding has been pulled away from the Law Centre by DOG. So these are the things that we would like to see to at least help people to have a opportunity to have free immigration advice, which is
I think there are clearly issues there. It's been the public response, the individual response of ministers has been encouraging, and the now information that's come forward about the operation and the strategy group. But headline commitments have to be followed through with action on the issues that you're raising if asylum seekers and refugees are going to have a different experience on the ground. And it's for the Northern Ireland Executive to make clear that there's a key priority to build a united community in Northern Ireland. That has to include refugee and asylum seekers. It has to include people of all racial backgrounds as well, and I think there's work to do to expedite that and to address that and to make sure actions stack up with words. But I thank you for the hard work that you're doing to make sure that happens. Thanks, Chair.
Well, thank you. Just a couple to finish with me. Denise, you talked about the challenge, I suppose, of integrating people, knowing that at the end of 5 years there may not be that permission to remain. What about the other way around? People who want to integrate but also maybe in 5 years' time would prefer to return home?
That's always going to be an option. People, the freedom to move. Being out in the camps last week, the vast majority of people that we met feel that they're in those camps in a temporary situation until they can go back to their homes in Syria. The vast majority have no intention of going anywhere near Europe. They want to go home. The few people that are coming, it's because they're vulnerable, because they know they will not survive life in the camps, that they know their children, will not have a future. For some of the families, as Justin said, they may not work, but many of the families may have a child with a disability and two parents who are able to. So, it's a very difficult situation. We are hoping that people will come with 5 years humanitarian protection. At the end of that, they would have entitlement to apply for citizenship. So we would be envisaging that if that's what people choose to do, that they would be able to do that.
The expectation, Chair, is that people will stay. And while people would never want to leave Syria, why would you want to leave your friends and your family and your job to go A, to a camp, B, take that perilous journey, or C, come to a strange land where you don't know anybody or anything? So people definitely would never want to leave, but the situation is such that they're forced to leave. And when they get here and they do their 5 years, we've seen it happen. They become Northern Ireland citizens. And their children are brought up here. We go to places in Alex's from constituency like Botanic Primary School, and you see just this.
And speak like us.
Yes, just speak. So those people then might, and they will have the option to return to Syria, but some of them may want to contribute to life in Northern Ireland. And I'm not an international relations expert, but the situation in Syria seems to be getting worse rather than better. What I wouldn't want is people to be placed under an expectation of, oh, Syria's all right now, why are you still here? That's not the case with any asylum seeker. When asylum seekers come and they get refugee status, they tend to stay in the place where they've got status, or they might migrate through Europe or the United Kingdom, but, it's not the Syria they left, essentially.
I think what I'm trying to suggest is that is not something you can put a number on. At the end of 5 years, you can say, well, we've taken in
support them on
200, 500,000, but you can't say X percent or X number will want to stay, X number will want to go.
No, you case by case.
Yeah, absolutely. Last couple of things are back to the political, and again, actually, it was Denise. You talked about the importance of a universal collective political will. Which I think you're hinting is not there. Is there more you want to say about that?
I think our understanding is that there is broad political will. Right. I just think that it's important that out in the communities that people hear the politicians they support saying it. It's not just politicians. I'd be saying the same for church leaders, for leaders in other different communities. I think there needs to be broad leadership here saying this is a good thing for Northern Ireland, that we are taking small numbers of people, we can do this, we can do it well, we're doing it because it's the right thing. I just think it takes, very often when we think of leadership, we think of a couple of people saying things, but it needs to be everybody to try and bring that feeling up within the community and ownership.
The other, finally, you mentioned Islamophobia, which struck a chord with me, because the first time I visited the Belfast Islamic Centre, I was asked would I support nothing more than proportionate funding, proportionate with other minority groups, for a new Islamic cultural centre. Because I think if you visit the Islamic Centre up at Botanic, it's not fit for purpose. But then on social media, I'm being accused of supporting public money for a mosque with minarets and call to prayers being blasted out over South Belfast.
Terrible thing to do that.
Which is not where I was, but and you're in the public domain. I'm not complaining. It's water off a duck's back, but it did hint of a degree of Islamophobia.
I think it has to be clear that when funding is given from government, it's given for good relations. It's not given to any faith organisation, whatever the religious background is, for religious purposes, is given for good relations, and that's be all and end all of it is. And good relations is a statutory obligation, so it has to be clear. But I think when you come across any kind of phobia, it's based on fear, hate or ignorance, and it's very rarely hate. It's almost always sort of a bit of fear and a bit of ignorance. And if you do the educational work and if you allow people to talk about their fears and address the real issues, then you can overcome that. But that work needs to be done, and it needs to be done in a sensitive way that allow people to voice their fears without suddenly being told they're being racist or whatever.
And we collectively need to give the lead.
Yeah, yes, absolutely.
Okay. Denise, Justin, and Neil. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much.
Members, just to complete the sort of follow-up on that briefing, how would you feel if we write to the department, ask for an update on the Minority Ethnic Crisis Funds, and specifically budget allocation this financial year, budget spend to date, and also the anticipated role of the Crisis Fund in the Vulnerable Persons Relocation Scheme? Okay. Any other business? If not, we adjourn until Wednesday the 11th at 2 p.m. here in room 30. Thank you.